Money analyst writers choose the black swan analogy to describe deeply continuous events in progress with little forward notice. The analogy simply does not fit anymore, as an armada of black swans is more appropriate, spotted on regular and frequent sightings. The jackass preference is to describe a series of major cracks in the financial fortress that defends the US dollar system and its decrepit US Treasury bond shuttle buggy. The vehicle is overloaded with supply and bereft of investors, upheld by a printing press, explained by pure heresy. Its derivative coil on the undercarriage axle system is broken from the overdone leverage and hidden machinations. The integrity of the US dollar, US Treasury bond brand name was cast off the American coat of arms, along with the Lehman Brothers killing to save Goldman Sachs, the adoption of Fannie Mae to conceal the fraud, and the AIG to contain the derivative payouts. The October hat-trick letter explains the Wall Street saga behind the scenes on the G-Sachs rescue managed by the Treasury Office. The U.S. financial fortress died in September 2008. What has happened in the following long 5 years has been an incredibly prolonged and desperate attempt, its creativity recognized, to extend life support to a corpse beset by necrosis and sclerosis, whose blood has turned toxic, lacking any oxygen or capital. The U.S. nation has lost its way, no longer capable of comprehending capitalism. Its policy initiatives actively destroy precious capital on the banker altar, celebrating the dark side with celebrations of fire. The emaciated body economic is being prepared to be handled by the JP Morgue for processing. Poorly informed foreign observers have a very difficult time coming to grips with the death of the king dollar. It is pushed by far worse than a zombie mule team. Its US dollar US T-bond team is a marauding killer of banking systems, destroyer of capital and wrecking ball of economics. The legitimacy of the global reserve currency is not found in a proper seal or exotic filament or ornate watermarks. It is found in a valid foundation in gold reserve, a sound economy on firm foundation, and a management team upholding integrity. The dollar T-bond has none of the above. It is the abused currency of bond vehicle exploited by a criminal banking organization. Credit goes to their ilk for better concealment of their identity and family bloodline. Their signature is stolen gold, bond fraud, war and genocide, with a penchant for control as a chaser. Some readers might believe that these public warnings are exaggerated, as a national condition is described with hyperbole. Not so, Cabo. The American citizens have seen their home equity largely depleted, long regarded as their inflation hedge. Now they have none. The same citizens have seen their pension plans largely depleted, long depended upon for future retirement income. The same citizens have seen their Social Security Trust Fund ransacked, long depended upon for basic future financial support. The same citizens have been treated like criminals for association with Occupy Wall Street, the billy club wielded by the FBI. The same citizens have been subjected to a long list of freedoms. The same citizens have been subjected to a long list of executive decrees which gut their civil liberties and Bill of Rights, long regarded as the bastion of freedom. The same citizens have been victimized by banker fraud, protected by the too big to fail mantra. The same citizens have been exploited by the military-industrial complex in predatory wars and narcotics vertically integrated business. Their bodies were cannon fodder, their coffins filled with heroin, the suicide rate extreme among soldiers due to stress and rape. The same citizens were recently exposed to false flag events in Syria, where the chemical weapon perpetrator is a U.S. ally, with home being on the Persian Gulf. The same citizens are now exposed to chemtrail toxic atmospheric lacing and Pacific radiation. Thus the air and water gradually becomes unfit for habitation and nourishment. So conclude the exaggerations, or perhaps on target. Beware the Warsaw factor mixed with the Stockholm syndrome. Do the research. The safety valves are gold and silver ownership and a ticket off the USS Titanic. The golden lifeboats are in short supply. Actually, they have been in short supply for 2 years, their shortage more acute with each passing month. The dollar T-bond brand is dead. The big questions that remain are how the brand will be declared dead, what new currencies will appear with proper asset backing, what form the gold standard will return to, and whether its criminal helm will face prosecution for fraud, counterfeit, sweetheart loans and money laundering. The answers are slowly being revealed. But before making any conclusions on these key overarching questions, consider the cracks in the financial fortress. Each alone is devastating, but together they describe a wrecked castle that is fast crumbling, the fallout victims to be legions. The world has not only begun to notice, but rather made plans to defend from the fallout. The National Socialist bankers will not go quietly into the night. They will steal everything in their path with full impunity. They will continue to wreck the planetary integrity. They will continue to construct their underground cities. They will continue to wage wars both for supply and line preservation and for obstruction of progress towards alternative pathways. The blowback has been impressive and far-reaching. The prestige of the US nation is gone. The reputation of the king dollar is gone. The beacon of capitalism is gone. What remains is the details of the collapse, the fallout from the impact, the extent of the resulting craters. As the dollar T-bond brand fades away, the third world awaits this once great nation. The price inflation, supply shortages, and civil disorder will echo the financial criminality, the vacant wealth, and the aggressive war stance as severe hardship and massive disruption is guaranteed. Many are the big ugly wild cards. Note the Afghan heroin industry and the distribution across the NATO bases, the clearinghouse functions managed by the J.P. Morgan by the Iraqi Export Bank in Baghdad. Note the pilfered U.S. gold reserves from Fort Knox by the Clinton-Rubin admin, both revered men. Note the staged events on 9/10 and 9/11, complete with hidden coup d'etat. Note the Snowden files to reveal criminal deeds at the U.S. helm, the man labeled a traitor. The defensive tactics have turned more desperate and often border on the edge of amusing. In 2002, certain officers who attempted to reveal the sequence of events in the culpable parties from being the event the previous year were smeared with child pornography accusations. Memories fade. Few recall the anthrax threat to the congressional ventilation systems just before the Patriot Act passage, the threat by courtesy of the FBI. In general, the opponents to the fascist core axis are declared terrorists. The accusers are deeply engaged in financial terror, war crimes, bond fraud on trillion-dollar scale, central bank gold thefts, bond counterfeit, theft of large funds, murder to defend the fortress, and a cake that bears treason as the icing. The last 3 U.S. presidents have refused to submit to the U.S. Congress their medical records as required by law. The details of their narcotics addiction would not sit well with the American public or even naive congressional members. Authority might not be followed. The world is watching. The world has identified the problem. The world has fingered the US dollar as the toxic paper, the US T-bond as the acid element in their banking systems, and the US bankers as the criminals in the room. The nations of the world have made grand strides in rallying behind China and Russia. The former has made a direct challenge to the US in global financial leadership. The latter has been making direct challenge to the US in global military leadership. The swing vote lies with the Saudis, who always hide behind Daddy's cape, whatever nation will provide them cover for their multi-billion-dollar thefts of national resources with pacifications via bond recycling. The Saudis find themselves alienated from their US protector. They find themselves at friction-filled odds with Russia. They will find some measure of safe haven behind the Chinese cape. The Saudis are busily making their pivot to China. Note the large petrochemical project begun last year near the Red Sea. The entire Arab Spring movement is a direct assault upon the Arab world, whose nations, one after the other, are run by autocrats, better described as benevolent dictators.